Good evening, folks, and tonight we're going to talk about some teams that are in the SEC and the Big Ten. Now, there's so much things that have to happen for all these teams that for them to even get in, it's not even funny. Now, we're going to talk about the SEC. Alabama and Texas A&M are literally tied in first place. Now, we got to look at their schedule, the remaining schedule that they got. LSU, Alabama, starting with Alabama, they got LSU, Oklahoma, and Auburn. No, we're not going to talk about their non-league schedule, so we'll just leave them out. Exceptional for Georgia Tech, considering they're a ranked team, so we'll talk about that one here momentarily. Now, and we'll see how much every team is favored by. Now, Alabama, they open as a 7-point favorite against LSU. Ahead, as they are favored 80.9% versus LSU's 19.1%. Now, only 7.5-point favorites, but 80.9% are all going towards Alabama versus 19.1%. That's impressive. Now, Oklahoma, they're favored every game. Now, they're favored to beat Oklahoma 72.9% to 27.1%. Also 7 points. Now, Auburn, on the other hand, on the road, 77.8% they're favored versus their 22.2% gain. Only 5.5%. So this is going to look very entertaining. 5.5-point favorites, so that's technically like 5 points or maybe 6 points. All depends how you look at it. I don't really know how you would even determine that. I always go by like solid numbers, so I'm going to guess that's either 6 points probably. But this is at Auburn. But LSU and Oklahoma are a home for Alabama. But now we go on to Texas. Texas A&M, who has Missouri, but Alabama hasn't lost any it hasn't lost any league games, so they're 5-0 in league play. So the regular season the non-league games really don't matter. It's the league games that technically matter. Now, Texas A&M, who hasn't lost any either. They're actually unbeaten. They're 7 points favorites against Missouri. They're 56.6% favor Texas A&M, while 43.4% favor Missouri. Now, when they play South Carolina, and they're at Missouri. Now, when they play South Carolina, 83.6% favor Texas A&M, while 16.4% favor South Carolina. Now, on the other hand, Texas A&M, when they travel to Texas, they're not favored. Texas is favored 56.7% to 43.3%. And the spread is 10.5. Now, we don't have a spread on Texas A&M and South Carolina. That's still a big question mark. So we don't really know what the spread is. Now, Georgia, on the other hand, 5-1. Their one loss was to Alabama, 24-21. They opened as a 9.5 favorite against Mississippi State on the road. Those 78.7% favor Georgia, while 21.3% favor Mississippi State. Texas, on the other hand, obviously, 57 point. We were just talking about that. 57.6% favor Georgia, while 42.4% favor Texas. And they open as a 2.5-point favorite at Georgia. Now, Georgia, that's the last of them all. If they beat Texas, then it's a win, but if they lose to Texas, then they're done. Now, if they end up beating Georgia Tech, then it's a 12.5 favorite. They're 12.5-point favorite, even though it's a non-league game. 80.6% favor Georgia, while 19.4% favor Georgia Tech. Now, on to Ole Miss. 76 point. They open as a 7.5 favorite against Florida, while Mississippi State is while Florida is, 76.3% favor Ole Miss, while 23.7% favor Florida. Now, they go on the road against Mississippi State, 72 point as a 12.5 favorite. 72.8% favor Mississippi State, while 20 favor Ole Miss, while 27.2% favor Mississippi State. Their loss was to Georgia, 43-35. Now, Texas, on the other hand, their only loss was to Florida, 29-21. Now, they travel to Georgia. Obviously, they're being underestimated at Georgia, 57.6% to 42.4%. Georgia is favored by 2.5. Unknown what the spread is against Arkansas, but they're favored to trounce Arkansas, 85.4% to 14.6%. Texas A&M. They are favored to beat Texas A&M, 56, obviously, we just said it, 56.7 to 43.3%. So that's that. Now, for this situation to happen, it looks like Texas A&M. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if Texas beats Texas A&M, but that only puts Alabama ahead. Now, Georgia, on the other hand, Georgia, I wouldn't be surprised, beats Texas. That technically puts it a two-way race, which means Georgia doesn't play Texas A&M at any point, so technically that leaves a weird predicament here. And we'll talk about that predicament if that happens here shortly. Ohio. Now we go to the Big Ten. Ohio State. Perfect. They're first over. Them and Indiana are both tied. Indiana's technically won 6 games, but they'll have a bye week here shortly. And Ohio State is also 5-0, so it's kind of like the top two teams here will try to work their way to the top. Now, Ohio State is literally favored by a landslide their next few games here. Against Purdue, they open as a 30.5-point favorite against Purdue, 97.1% to 2.9%. UCLA, they're 98.4% favorite to 1.6%. Rutgers, they're 97.2% to 2.8%. Now, Michigan, that's going to be interesting. They're 79.5% favorites to 20.5% favoring them. So that'll be interesting. Indiana, on the other hand, they're 14.5 favorite against Penn State. 82.7% favor Indiana, while 17.3% favor Penn State. So that's going to be an interesting game to watch. I look forward to that to be a very good game. Now, 97.4% favor Wisconsin, while 2.6% favor Wisconsin. I'm at 97.4% for Indiana, so I apologize if I said that wrong. Now, on the other hand, when they play Purdue, 97.1% favor Indiana, while 2.9% favor Purdue. So them two pretty much will seem to be the lock for the Big Ten championship. Unless Michigan comes up with some kind of magic and beats Ohio State again this year, which I honestly don't know how that's going to happen. Because the way Michigan's been playing this year, I mean, I get it, last year I said the same thing, but this year, I'm almost certain Ohio State will win this year. Now, Michigan, on the other hand, speaking of them, they're at Northwestern first. They have a bye this week, but they host Northwestern. They're expected to win 79.3% to 20.7% favoring Northwestern. And then they travel to Maryland, 80.6% and 19.4%. But then they're hosting Ohio State, which is about their only advantage. But that's where when we just talked about Ohio State's advantage over them, 79.5 to 20.5%. I mean, this literally just shows you how good they are. Their only Big Ten loss was to USC, 31-13. Now, Oregon doesn't even play Michigan this year, so they can easily just overlap Michigan. Now, Oregon, their only loss was to Indiana, 30-20. They travel to Iowa, where they're 6.5-point favorites. 29.7% favor Iowa, 70.3% favor Oregon. Minnesota, 96% favor Oregon, 4% favor Minnesota. When they host USC, 71.9% favor Oregon, 28.1% favor USC. When they travel to Washington, 76.6% favor Oregon, and 23.3% favor Washington. Iowa is a different story. They're 4-1. Their only loss was also to Indiana by a score of 20-15. A very close margin. Not a blowout by all means. And Iowa was unranked. And they had their chances to beat. Iowa had their chances to get on the board and win, but they failed to. Oregon, obviously they're, like we were saying, 70.3% to 20 favoring Oregon. Obviously, then we got USC, 76.1% favoring USC to 23.9% favoring Iowa. Now, Iowa's favored the last two games against Michigan State, 88.2% to 11.8%. But it's going to be a closer one with Nebraska, 55.9% favoring Iowa, while 44.1% favoring Nebraska. So, that's going to be an iffy game there between Nebraska and Iowa. Now, USC, that's going to be an entertaining one. This one, they lost to Illinois by a last-second field goal, 34-32. So, USC had their chances, but they failed to capitalize on them. Northwestern, they're a 14.5 favorite, 90.8% favored to beat Northwestern, 90.8% favoring USC, well, 9.2% favoring USC. Then obviously we kind of went over Iowa, and they favor USC. Then same with Oregon, where Oregon's favored to win. Then UCLA, 93.9% favoring USC, while 6.1% favors UCLA. Now, what do all these games mean? You see where Oregon is favored to win the rest of their games, except for Oregon is favored literally to win the rest of their games. Not one loss is expected out of Oregon. They're expected to win the rest of their games. USC, they'll be gone. Iowa, gone. Now, if this all works out fine and dandy, it'll be Ohio State and Indiana, plain and simple. Now, if Michigan somehow pulls a hat trick out, we'll talk about the SEC here. Now, none of these teams, Texas plays Texas A&M. Looks like Texas is favored to win, supposedly. But if that does work, that knocks Texas A&M out of contention to take on Alabama. Now, Oklahoma, if any of these teams end up beating Alabama, which I highly doubt will happen, Alabama, who's favored by 7 points and then 5.5 against Auburn, when it's at Auburn, so that's probably why it's only 5.5. Now, Auburn, who's not really that good this year. I see this being a very hard-fought game, and all this. Oh, Oklahoma's going to be a really tough one. After their 24-3 loss last year at Oklahoma, I look forward to this to being a very tough competition. But things got to change. Oklahoma is way down on the list. They're 2-3 in league play. So I don't see them really getting anywhere with this. I don't see them getting into the tournament. I don't see them getting any kind of contention play unless they win out the rest of their games, which will be shocking. Because title winners will be automatic bids. Texas, if they can win the rest of their games from here on out, great. They got Georgia, they got Arkansas, and they have Texas A&M on their schedule. If they can win the rest of these games, it'll be awesome. Now, if Georgia gets beat by Texas, then that'll be the end for them. Then they fall. If one of these teams falls, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a rematch between Georgia and Alabama or something of that nature. Now, it would be a magic if there's some kind of magic hat trick coming out of the play of one of these lower SEC teams like Texas or them. Now, Auburn, I don't see Auburn pulling it out, but maybe they do. I don't know. I mean, anything's possible at this point. Now, Ohio State, literally 90s all the way through till they play Michigan, which is 79.5% chance of victory over Michigan, which I see happening. Now, you see how it all is. They've literally dominated every opponent in double digits, except for Texas. Texas was a phenomenal team, and there's nothing weak about Texas whatsoever. Indiana, they got Penn State still, Wisconsin, and Purdue. 3 talented teams left. 14.5 favorites against Penn State at Penn State. So this is the neck of the line for Indiana. Penn State, is hungry for a win. And they're going to do everything they can to pull out a victory against Indiana. Michigan, on the other hand, I guess you can say it's all what it can be. If they can beat Ohio State, they're going to try everything they can to beat Ohio State. But I just don't see it this year. Because you see how they played. It was very close last year, 13-10, embarrassing. But you got to look at how things work. They're ahead. If they do win by some magic, they would play Indiana for the Big Ten title game, supposedly. At least that's what I'm understanding. Because they lost 31-13 to USC. Badly. And they got other key games here. Their other loss was to Oklahoma. So that's other 2 key games that they lost, which dropped them out of contention of trying to get in. But if they end up beating Ohio State, that's a totally different ballgame, which I don't think will happen. But Ohio State pretty much has a key road to victory if they can play their cards right. And if they beat everyone from here on out. And if Indiana pulls a good one. But if Penn State beats them, then I wouldn't be surprised if it's Ohio State and Michigan. But then again, if Oregon plays their cards right, then it will be all the way. Then it'll probably be Oregon versus Ohio State. They'll probably be Oregon and Ohio State taking it on. Ohio State beats Indiana, but most likely it'll be Ohio State and Indiana. Because Indiana will have 1 loss, and that loss was to Penn State, who's not even in contention at all. They'll just have a contingent spot in the title game in the Big Ten Championship, which will give them a chance to beat Ohio State. And if they beat Ohio State, they'll be automatic bids, and that'll leave them out with 2 losses. They'll probably still remain in the top 12 for the title game. So who knows where they'll be at next week after this tournament. So we'll talk about it. We'll look at where we are next week. With that being said, hit the like button, hit the bell for notifications. With that being said, I'm out of here. Peace.